Ooh, that was pretty quick. I think because I'm right by the router over here, so that's always a good sign. All right, are you fine, gentlemen? Ready?
Sure.
As ready as I can be.
Cool. Yeah, as I always say, we'll do a short podcast this time. And a few hours later. All right.
For about 3 hours on the WCW alone, so we got
Exactly. All right, one last mic check. John, say something.
Test 1 2 3 test.
Okay, my headphone is jacked up. There we go. Can you hear me, guys?
Oh yes.
Oh, that's much better. Okay, yeah. For some reason, I think the cord was popping up. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome everybody to SQW 5 Monday Night Turbo. This week we recap the Monday Night Wars of the late 90s and how that impacts TNA today.
Oh.
I see what you did there.
I'm Dali. I'm Dali, medium hair deadlock Dimovsky. Joining me as usual is bald and beard JJ Holder Supreme. And
I'm John 3-day weekend Keo.
There you go. Hello, gentlemen. How are you guys?
Oh, doing great.
I'm trying to get these intros a little more energetic. So, and this episode is named Monday Night Turbo, which is just wonderful. I figured it would work well with the whole Nitro and Impact and all that kind of stuff. But we were just saying in the pre-show, it's gonna be another short show today, which always ends up making it a long show. We have a couple really fun topics to talk about. It's been a couple weeks to record. We took last week off. I'm kind of liking these. Do 3 weeks or so, take a break. 3 weeks, take a break. We'll figure out the plan as we go forward. I will say one thing, that everything is set up for iTunes. So by this, maybe tomorrow, more than likely this weekend, we will be up on iTunes where you can listen to us, and then eventually we'll get the videos up. However, that's good. We'll see how that'll work on iTunes, but you can definitely listen to us and make sure you subscribe and comment on YouTube, dude. That'd be awesome. Or whatever people do. Yeah, whatever happens with people. Anyway, so, and we will eventually also get our own YouTube channel. Right now, we're just using mine for a bit, but that's okay. Anyways, very, very fun show today. We're going to recap the Monday Night Wars of the late 90s, early 2000s, and how that really does impact what's happening today and all the craziness that's happened since then. So I want to jump right into the Monday Night Wars. And this is something that was super near and dear to my heart because I was going into college when things were really heating up between WWF back then and WCW. So I do want to ask you guys a question is, were you WWF guys or WCW fans, or what were you?
Well, for me, growing up, I was a WWF guy, a WWF kid. For WCW's point, we didn't really get very much of it, just the stuff on TBS. It was well into the NWO takeover stuff before we got Nitro in Canada through TSN, and they were showing that at like 1 a.m. or like Tuesday afternoon replays. It wasn't live at all, but Canada is well known to be WWF country anyway. And to that point, I mean, in the Attitude Era, when all that stuff was coming to a head, I definitely found myself rooting for. I felt like suddenly Vince and them were the underdogs, trying to fight back, and I was definitely sided with them.
Okay. How about you, JJ?
Definitely WCW more than WWF.
Really? Okay.
They're up until a point, obviously, but like by late '98, it was the switch had come, and it was like I was all in on WWF at the time. Okay. But leading up to that, WCW was the one, like, that was my dad's favorite. So that was the one he watched more because that's where all the guys that he watched was, and he wanted to see Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair and guys like that. So, and WWF was cartoony early on.
That's true. Yeah.
When stuff first started off, so you can only watch somebody doink the clown matches.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, WCW for sure.
So growing up, I was definitely a WWF guy early on. I'd say probably the early '80s, throughout the mid '80s, and then WCW, which I think was it NWA back then? I'm not even 100% sure what it was. When the name changed, title change, all that.
Well, NWA was sort of a sort of catch-all for a lot of those things. It was a group of promotions. So
okay.
Like, WCW fell under the NWA banner, Jim Crockett Promotions, things like that.
So there was I think it was like a Saturday night NWA show.
And that was the wrestling show.
Yes, and I watched that every Saturday night growing up, because the WWF stuff was usually Saturday mornings. I think it was like Main Event? I forget what the show was, but it was on Saturday mornings. Obviously, it's all pre-taped stuff.
Superstars.
Yeah, Superstars. Thank you. So that was my only outlet to wrestling was Saturdays, and I only watched NWA, WCW, Crockett, all that kind of stuff together, only because it was on, and really only rooted for like Sting and Ric Flair and maybe the Four Horsemen. That was basically because there weren't a whole ton of stars at that time. I mean, they didn't carry the cachet that WWF did. So I kind of viewed NWA as kind of like a dad's wrestling division. And
it was very Southern wrestling.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was more about the wrestling where, you would actually get superstars against fighting wrestling against each other on the regular broadcasts. Whereas WWF, you had, like we mentioned before, it was a Brooklyn Brawler or, one of the jobbers that were on there.
And a lot of those sort of like, Piper's Pits. And
exactly. Yep. It was more of entertainment than it was wrestling. Yep.
Yeah. I enjoy watching WCW when I could. My grandmothers both had different cable packages than I, and so they had TBS when I didn't have it. So I go watch it there when I could. So and like you, I enjoyed it for the wrestling. The wrestling style was definitely different. It was just like it was. I would go watch that stuff when Hogan went over. In that mid '90s. So once Hogan went over and all his buddies, I kind of got turned off from WCW a lot.
Yeah, same here.
I was fed up with him in his late WWF run at the time, and that carried over to WCW, so I kind of turned off most of it, except that I still flip it through, but I wouldn't sit down and watch Hogan versus the Dungeon of Doom matches by any stretch. But it's just the the Bobby Eatons and Dean Malenkos and the Steve Regals at that time, and Flair, of course. I would watch for that stuff, but when Hogan came on,
I was a huge Randy Savage fan, and that was where
Savage.
Sure.
So, yeah.
The superpowers, they were the tag team. No, I totally agree with you, and I think when the WWF really started to take hold at the late '80s, early '90s, kind of towards the end of Hogan's initial run there, and some of the other newer superstars were showing up, like Undertaker, and things that people were really starting to get new talent in. I mean, I was a huge British Bulldog fan back then. So there's a lot of cool, interesting new talent coming in, and they were really kind of playing off that whole kind of bubblegum pop wrestling of that time.
Bret Hart becoming the biggest name in the industry said a lot about where WWF was going at the time. And
and it was entertaining.
Hulk Hogan needed to go.
Yeah, I think there was a reason that it was on in the mornings with superstars, and in the evenings, the WCW NWA show would air for more of the adult type stuff. So
it was that was the time slot. Like that was the most coveted time slot in. I mean, Vince McMahon took over that time slot at one point.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
That was a bad day for Superstation. They got some rough letters.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because as I watched you guys gave me great homework to watch some of the Monday Night War stuff. I plowed through like 6 episodes today at the office, and you have the iPhone set up here, and you're watching that while you're working, and then you're listening to podcasts when you're driving. So it worked out really well. Definitely thank you for that homework. And I had seen there was I think it was on Netflix. There's a whole documentary about the Monday Night War, which I thought was pretty cool. And it was a kind of like an hour-long summary of the whole thing. But and it's actually pretty cool.
And it is one of those, history is written by the victors kind of.
Yes. WWE Networks is definitely written by the victor. Because Vince McMahon is the nicest person on the planet.
Yeah. The Death of WCW book by Brian Alvarez and R.D. Reynolds is a very good sort of history. It just came out on audiobook, and I've been listening to it. Like, it's a 10th anniversary edition because the book came out like 11 years ago. So WCW had just barely been shut down by this point.
Oh, wow.
So they've expanded it for this new version. So it's sort of, it takes a lot, it folds TNA into it a little bit. Sort of the lessons that weren't learned from what happened to WCW, but it's a really good history of WCW. Like the first quarter of the book is a history lesson of WCW and where it came from. It's very well worth a read or a listen. So
very cool. I'm gonna have to definitely check that out because it's a whole era of wrestling that I found really exciting. So to kind of jump into how that leads into the WWE and WWF and WCW Monday Night Wars. Essentially, Vince McMahon, you mentioned that time slot and how he kind of took it over, and he was not necessarily buddies with Ted Turner, but they were business partners. And he wanted to do a Monday night show, right? And he ended up taking USA Network for the Monday night show. Correct. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this information, which pissed off Ted Turner, obviously.
I mean, Ted Turner had already pushed him out at that time.
Yes. Yep.
He was getting the bad press, so he gave a time slot to. Who did he give it? I forget. Another Jim Crockett or somebody. Who did he? Well, I'll have to read about it again. But and that made Vince mad because he just sort of assumed he was going to be the only, and Saturdays at 6:05 was the wrestling program.
Sure.
There's one at 7:05.
Yes.
Doing better than his. So
the USA Network, he switches over to there and ends up coming up with the Monday Night Raw, which I think it was initially, it wasn't even Raw. It was just kind of like clips of stuff from throughout the week, right?
Yeah, they had some stuff on USA. I think that was where Primetime Wrestling and
that's right. Yeah,
was on there for a while, and then once that came to a close, they had a spot to fill, which they decided to turn into a somewhat live wrestling program.
Yeah, somewhat live, exactly.
Only 1 hour back then.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like less produced. That's why it got the Raw name. Arena, but obviously that changed quickly.
So and it was also kind of interesting as arenas were very small. I think the first one was in a like a theater or something in New York or whatever it was. It was like 800 people or 600 people or something that they could fit in.
Yeah. The Manhattan Center.
The Manhattan Center. There you go. Yep. So they started Raw, and at the same time, was it around the same time that WCW had started Nitro?
No, Nitro came
after.
After,
right?
2 years later.
After Raw, that's right. Okay.
After Raw, yeah.
And so I think the way the story was told on the Monday Night War program is it was essentially Ted Turner saw some value in competing with Vince McMahon and ended up kind of giving an open casting call internally in WCW to have a producer. He wanted to get into more of the entertainment side of what wrestling was about, and lo and behold, Eric Bischoff, he was the WCW magazine guy, right? He was the on-air kind of the roundup of news dude.
He wasn't. Didn't have any sort of like actual power within the company at the time.
Nah, he was like an interview guy. Good-looking guy. Standing holding the mic, basically.
Yeah.
And he ended up applying, and he got the gig, and kind of really took hold of WCW, and I think he essentially created Nitro, right?
He did. His first big move was bringing Hogan in. He was able to convince Hogan to come in, and then
Hogan was working on, was it Thunder in Paradise at that time? You guys remember that show? I used to watch that show. I don't know why I watched it, but I did. There were other wrestlers on that show too, which is funny. But I think the way that his buddies, exactly. And the way it was explained was that Hogan was recording Thunder in Paradise, and literally in the next slot over was Nitro.
No, it was
I'm sorry,
Saturday night.
Saturday nights, exactly.
Tape at MGM or
That's what it was. Yep. And so he, it was the way that was all kind of taking place, and he got Hogan to come over, which eventually brought in Macho Man and other superstars. And
Macho Man was already there.
Was Macho Man already? Was he there before
Macho
Hogan?
Man was already. Yeah, he was there before Hogan.
Oh, I thought he wasn't. Okay. Well, either way, they started bringing in more and more of the WWF superstars because the WWF was trying to get younger. For some of these older talent, they're starting to slowly either phase out or whatever. Hogan's contract hadn't been renewed for wrestling. He had gone into kind of full-time entertainment. Randy Savage Macho Man was doing commentary, and he didn't want to. He wanted to actually get into the ring again. And I do remember some of those episodes and those interviews, and you could tell he really wanted to get into.
Watch some early Monday Night Raws. And
you feel bad for him.
Oh, yeah, brother. I just gotta stand here behind the desk, brother. I keep saying brother, but that's Hogan. Anyways, and so they came up with Nitro after Raw had been around for a couple years, and decided, hey, here's our start date for Nitro. And they had signed, I think it was Lex Luger, right? Was it Lex?
Yeah.
And his contract had just run out. And so Lex was the guy that had replaced Hogan over like 2-3 years after Hogan left.
For a while.
Well, they tried.
They were trying to, exactly. I remember he went from like being the badass Lex, like long-haired Lex Luger in NWA, WCW, to like this. He wore like a lot of red, white, and blue, and he became like this like total face, like almost baby face level of face, which is
it's the exact same thing that they're doing with Roman Reigns, where they pick their horse and they're gonna ride it to the
till the legs fall off, exactly. And he did okay. Luger did okay, but he was no Hogan, that's for sure.
Yeah, he doesn't have like a quarter of the charisma that Hulk Hogan had. He couldn't and like never could hold an interview. Like it was.
He's stiff, very stiff.
Yeah, you're not gonna be Hulk Hogan if you can't grab the crowd like Hulk Hogan could, and that was 90% of Hulk Hogan's appeal was how he interacted with the crowd.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other never his wrestling prowess. Like,
No, and trying to recapture the lightning in the bottle that was Hulkamania wasn't going to happen anyway, despite their best efforts. I mean, Luger just happened to be the guy.
The fans had already picked who they wanted to be the successor. Like Bret Hart was sort of the guy, and that pushing Lex Luger instead of Bret Hart as the face of your company was never going to work.
Yeah.
And so Luger wanted to get out, and his contract still hadn't quite been renewed. They had I think he said they had a Saturday show, and Sunday morning he had signed secretly to WCW through Eric Bischoff.
Yep.
Monday was Monday Nitro, the debut of Monday Nitro. At the same time, it was going to go right up against Raw.
It was actually Raw was not on that week.
And as I said, Raw was actually preempted that night for whatever reason. And so Nitro had the entire night to itself. And I think they made a great point on the Monday Night Wars documentary or the show. And they said it was perfect. People were looking around for wrestling. They couldn't find Raw, but here's Monday Nitro. And like the very first person that comes onto the it was done in a mall, which was pretty funny. The very first person that shows, or one of the first people that show up after Hogan and all them, is Lex Luger shows up, and people flip out because nobody had any idea. They snuck him in.
Even the people in the company didn't know Lex Luger was about to walk out there. So huge deal. And that's a very, very good way to tune in next week.
Yeah.
I never had to worry about missing Monday Night Raw because Nitro was live.
Yes, exactly. Nitro was live. Raw wasn't live back then. It was only partly.
Not always,
Yeah, Nitro was always on at like 5 p.m. my time, and Raw was always on at 8 o'clock on up against a repeat of Nitro. So it was never much of a war for me because I always got to watch both without having to miss the other one.
And one of the interesting things, and Bischoff, I remember him doing this early on in Raw, is that he would find out the the results from WWF, and he would just like say, "Hey guys, letting you guys know this is what happens, so don't bother watching."
Yeah,
I remember that being pretty funny.
That was a very terrible thing to do, but
it was exactly.
The first wrestling shows I went to was a Monday Night Raw taping back.
Oh, really?
A month's worth of Monday Night Raws.
Wow.
That was miserable. Like, you're seeing the same guys wrestle 2 or 3 times.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Here's Scott Hall. Here's Razor Ramon again. Here's Razor Ramon again.
Yeah, I saw Shawn Michaels wrestle like 3 or 4 times.
Jeez. Was it like a 6-hour show that they taped while you were there?
Yeah, I mean, and they taped like, superstars and dark matches too. So it was.
That's insane. That's absolutely insane. But that's how WWE did it back then, and they were fine doing it.
Yeah, because at the time they were hemorrhaging money, so they needed to save it.
Yes. Yeah.
Just doing it in one town for a month saves a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It's how TNA has been able to survive for as long as they have.
Yeah. So Nitro got pretty successful pretty quickly, I think, because they were live and they kept bringing talent over. And I think Luger signed for $100,000, which even by then, I mean, as highly touted as he was through WWE or WWF, that wasn't a ton of money. Now that's nothing for a wrestler, right? I mean, it's basically pennies for what some of these bigger superstars get, obviously. But he came over just because he wanted to get out of WWE and wanted to get back to some other stuff he was doing. So they had this big roster. They kept getting more and more folks from WWF. I keep calling it WWF at the time. People started to filter over. But you still had guys like Sting and Ric Flair. Then you got some of the women's wrestlers coming over, like Medusa. It became this whole big thing where they had they called it the big boys, right? It was the
we're the big boys.
We're the big boys.
Exactly. And WWE or WWF at the time was still courting a lot of those younger guys and Shawn Michaels, the Hardys, and
build up a roster that had been decimated, and,
exactly
with injuries and retirements and jumping ship. So.
Yeah, just dollars and cents, really. Just not being able to afford the big contracts.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, when you have Eric Bischoff, who has just a blank check that he can throw out, because nobody's checking those numbers until the end of the year. It's.
Yep.
And it's an interesting. I'm glad you bring it up because Turner owned WCW and NWA, and so they were a business, a big entertainment company, not Time Warner, all that stuff, not necessarily a wrestling company. And meanwhile, WWF was wrestling first before anything else.
Yeah.
And so when you're focused only on wrestling, we have one product, and it goes through some turbulent times, and you're on death's door. And I do remember the WWF at the time, people not thinking it was actually going to survive that much longer, or at least not in that same capacity, And WCW, they were the ones that instituted like really regular pay-per-views and a lot of those, a lot of the things that we kind of take for granted as the norm right now with wrestling. It really became because of the WCW and because of some of the really cool things that they were trying.
It was a lot of catch-up for Vince.
Yes, exactly. And those first couple years, you definitely saw it because when they finally transitioned to a fully live show, it took a while. I mean, it had been decimated by that Bischoff's tactics, and for a long time they pretended that WCW was nothing, didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And I think they do mention kind of a pivotal point where they start to mock Hogan and Macho Man and Bobby Heenan and all that kind of stuff because they had obviously gone to WCW with those fake ads of
the huckster and the nacho man.
The huckster and the nacho man, yeah, exactly.
Billionaire Ted.
Yes, billionaire Ted. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, at that point, the minute you acknowledge your enemy, you start to give them leverage, and that's kind of what happened.
And Bischoff was never afraid to use the name WWF on TV.
Right.
Other names of other he knew what he wanted to do and didn't care.
Yep.
So whether it be reading results or just straight up offering, insane deals to other wrestlers, like he knew what he wanted to do to be able to take down Vince McMahon, and he pulled it off for a couple years. Like it wasn't that long that he was on top.
Right.
He really made a killing when it was like.
Yeah, naming other feds is a crazy thing. Like even today, when they say New Japan or Ring of Honor on WWE TV, it seems like this taboo thing. It's like, oh my gosh, they're admitting people exist, but yet they don't say they never say TNA. Still, yet, yeah.
That's coming. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And so obviously, you know, Nitro gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and I can't quite remember how the whole thing happened, but I remember when the NWO first showed up. To me, that was the big thing. NWO really redefined storylines and wrestling, and you had this crazy rogue faction that brought this completely different layer onto wrestling. It went beyond kind of the typical, you know, guys beating each other up with some rivalries here and there to this anarchist feel.
The sort of way that they protected the NWO, and how they presented the NWO was like unheard of. Like the whole, like, it was smart doing the whole like vignettes thing. Like, we're not going to, WCW wasn't giving them TV time to cut their promos, so now they have to cut these. They have to pay for advertising. No, you know, it
was great.
Yeah, they didn't sell the T-shirts at the merchandise stand. They had to sell them separately from the regular merchandise stand for a little bit.
They did. I mean, that whole guerrilla idea worked really well because, I mean, you saw people.
They didn't have, you know, Hall and Nash didn't have names for the first, like, you know, couple of till like their first pay-per-view appearance. Like that was
I remember going to like baseball games in the 90s, and instead of seeing like, you know, the Tigers, people wearing Tigers jerseys or Lions, it's like you saw NWO, which is like, you know, that's really weird. At the same time, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. So that got WCW in a lot of trouble too. There was and stuff around that.
Yeah, well, the implied invasion by WWF was a. Yeah, they couldn't keep that going for too much longer, but it definitely stirred the pot enough to get lots of eyes to see what the hell was going on.
Yeah, it was.
You can find the sort of like the court deposition tapes that they filmed because they exist, and WWF plays them once in a while. Like on I think there was like a Click or NWO video or something on the network or something, and it's like it's them like in character talking, like they're under, you know, they're giving
under oath,
but they're like turning to the camera and acknowledging Vince McMahon and stuff.
Oh, jeez,
it's weird that it exists and that.
So well,
that far.
Oh God, and I thought that, I mean, it keeps adding more to the idea, right? So Nitro gets huge. I think the thing for me, the moment I knew that WCW had basically taken over was the parties, right? They'd have Nitro party. Remember those Nitro parties?
Yeah.
And I had buddies at colleges, because it was right around the time when I was in college. I was a freshman. And buddies in colleges that were trying to host parties, and they're getting a hold of WCW and saying, hey, we're doing our Nitro party, because they would like come in like record from different parties around the States and stuff. And yeah, my buddies were throwing Nitro parties, and we slowly, just kind of by, I don't know, by attrition or what, but more and more folks started showing up at our dorm room Monday nights, and we just watched Nitro, which to me was, I think that was the moment that I didn't become a WCW. Maybe I did kind of become a WCW guy at that time, because WWF was just kind of, it was low quality. It was really hokey at the time. There weren't like a lot of strong characters,
it was the same. I mean,
yes, it was the same.
It was, they didn't adapt.
Nope.
And it wasn't for a couple more years until they really started, you know, adapting. And
it was
the biggest year of wrestling ever was 1998.
98.
Oh, really? Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been watching old Raws, and I'm at the point now in 97. I'm about 2 months out from the screw job, and so
what was the screw job?
Starting to take shape.
The Montreal screw job in November '97, when Brett got screwed and he left the company, and Vince became Mr. McMahon and all that. And Austin came up, was on it. It was going up very quickly, and Shawn Michaels DX had just been around, you know, pretty shortly at that point, and it was they were really finding the things that they were throwing at the walls were finally sticking, and now they were the starts of momentum. The very beginning of the momentum shift was around late '97 and getting into '98.
Yeah, characters started getting defined in the WWF at that time.
Yeah,
very important for WWF to learn that part of it. To
like all those young guys and new guys that you mentioned, Dali, they finally found who they were and how they could work within that. Again, I thought it was just a complete land of experimentation to try to see what was going to work and who was going to people who would rise to the top, and they found those people and they rode it to the races.
Yeah, they at times it seemed like they would take any character whatsoever, because you had moments in WWF in the mid '90s where you'd have folks that would be on there for maybe 1 or 2 weeks and that was it, because they just were not very good. The crowd didn't enjoy them. They couldn't work a crowd. They couldn't work the map. But it seemed like they were taking anybody.
I so distinctly remember the Goon.
Oh, yeah. I remember the Goon.
Like, yeah, how about a hockey bully? Yeah, that's a wrestling character.
Yep. I still remember one of my favorite things was the egg hatching. Or the infamous hatching. Was it Survivor Series or was it
because Survivor Series was their Thanksgiving pay-per-view. So of course a turkey hatches from an egg, sure.
Which still is that's still maybe my all-time favorite pay-per-view event is Survivor Series. Just the way it was set up in the olden days with the 4 versus 4. But we can get into that kind of stuff later on. Sure. So I think 97, 98 is when the momentum really starts to shift. And I mean, the WCW had been riding the NWO for a while at that point. And you had all like the splintering factions within the NWO with like the Wolf Pack, and they had the red shirts and the white and all that kind of stuff.
If you ever want to hear some very interesting stories, it's like Hulk Hogan had full creative control of his contract.
Yes.
That was the major thing. That's the one thing that really hurt WCW a lot in the long run, was giving these guys full, like especially like Hulk Hogan, full creative control, so he could say no to something.
Yeah.
But he also knew how to play the ratings game. Like when he knew when WCW was going to go up against football or not basketball finals or things.
Okay.
When he would decide to take some time off and then come back the next week and ratings shoot back up again, and he can say it was his fault that he wasn't there last week, so of course ratings dropped. But
of course, right?
But it's people are apparently idiots and didn't realize. Oh wait, we weren't on last week.
Well, and I think that is what ended up hurting WCW in the long run. Was you had Bischoff, a guy who wasn't necessarily a businessman. And his team weren't business folks. They were producers. They were folks that they knew entertainment, but they were, like you mentioned earlier, they were signing contracts, just throwing money out there. They weren't smart with their money.
That was also one of the huge things.
Yes.
Of Hall and Nash was guaranteed contracts. That didn't exist at the time, and now that's normalcy. That is everyone has a guaranteed contract now, and that's everyone thanks Hall and Nash for that. Like every time you see them in interviews or something, it's like wrestlers thank them for introducing guaranteed contracts. They had stupid things like favored nations.
Oh, really?
Which was if somebody came in and made more money than them, they got a boost to match.
Oh,
them.
wow. Huh.
So they would bring guys in and have like friends and stuff come in to bigger money, so they would guarantee themselves.
Oh, geez. Well, and I mean, gaming that system.
Good politics. And that's what WCW was all about, was politics.
And I think that led to one of the eventual downfalls of WCW. That's when you started to see talent start going back to WWF. The momentum was shifting in the late 90s, 98, 99.
John Waltman went back to the WWF to become X-Pac. He was sort of like the first sort of like, things are looking very bad for WCW. It wasn't
people are getting pissed off at Bischoff.
Yeah, it wasn't blatantly obvious, but it really made you think like, well, like that's weird. Like you had a lot of money from WCW. You just go back to WWF where you really weren't treated particularly well in the WWF in the first place. And
that young talent was becoming
mediocre.
Really good in WWF, and they were offering a lot of cool opportunities, and they had brought their pay-per-view game up, their presentation, and they were able to focus on the wrestling. Meanwhile, WCW, owned by Turner, the conglomerate, Time Warner, all of a sudden you had the AOL Time Warner merger. I remember this being like the biggest merger on the planet at the time, right? AOL, Time Warner come together, and AOL, excuse me, started reevaluating all of the properties that Time Warner and AOL kind of had together, and decided, hey, you know what? WCW doesn't quite fit in with what we want. The money isn't consistent. We're seeing a downturn in money and possibilities and options, and there's not a lot of growth.
Yeah, at the very end, I mean, Bischoff was trying to buy WCW.
Yes, he was. Yeah,
2001. Like at the very end, it made sense to buy WCW. I mean, like it had heritage, it had a cash to it, had weight to it. But like, you know, like you said, AOL, Time Warner, and Ted Turner was out of the picture.
Yeah.
If Ted Turner still had a say, WCW would still be around.
Yeah. Okay.
He was very passionate about the company, and it was never going to die if he had the final say. But once he lost control of that say, he didn't, because, you know, WCW lost money more than it ever made money. So
that's true.
Yeah.
Except for that brief period and before they started spending way too much.
Yeah. So like, you know, from like 97 to early 98 is when they really started turning profits. And or like, no, 96 and 97 is definitely where they started turning profits. And then like 98 is where things started to again. And by 2000, everything, they had gone through management changes left and right. They couldn't figure anything out. Talent was leaving everywhere. They were trying to do that thing where they're bringing in young talent from other promotions and stuff again.
And it was too late at that point.
Once AOL, Time Warner, once everyone decided that time slot for wrestling anymore, that's without a time slot, WCW is worth zero.
Exactly. And
like, do you know how long it would take to, like, especially at that particular moment in time, like how long it would take to hammer out a deal with any other network? Like, even if Bischoff were to buy it, what would he do with it for a year and a half, 2 years until he could really get a deal going?
Exactly. And you know, they were off Turner. Their contract ended there, and finally in comes Vince McMahon and ends up purchasing it, right? I guess after the deal kind of falls through with Bischoff and his investment partners. Again, Bischoff was not a business guy.
0-hour kind of thing. Like it
really was.
48 hours. It went from Bischoff buying it to Bischoff not buying it to WWE buying it. So
I remember refreshing. I forget what website it was, but I would refresh. Maybe it was IGN or whatever. You know, I'm refreshing the website like every hour or two, and there's a completely new update. We're hearing, our sources are telling us this. Which is crazy.
Yeah, it was chaos at that time.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Super exciting when it got announced that WWE was buying WCW, because you thought there could be some really cool stuff about that.
Yeah. Oh boy, did that kind of crash and burn pretty quickly, because you had, you know, Shane McMahon shows up after Vince McMahon does that I still remember that simulcast, because they announced this is going to be the last show on TNT. They didn't really quite want to say this is going to be the last show of WCW.
They were very cagey on committing to anything with WCW.
Yep. It's the last show on, and I know me and my buddies were all watching. We were at my house watching, and we're like, "Oh, it's the last show on TNT. They're going to announce where they're going to go next, right? Maybe it's TBS, maybe it's MTV or whatever, somewhere else, Spike TV, whatever was around at the time." No, they just kind of they didn't do it. And I mean, it was actually a really cool show. Shane McMahon shows up after that. Yeah, the simulcast. Shane McMahon walks in, takes over. This kind of feigned family rivalry thing, which never
and was sort of at its most insufferable as a point. Like, you were really, he was starting to really wear out his welcome as Mr. McMahon, and so it was kind of neat to sort of throw a new monkey wrench into his gimmick. But we know how that turned out in the end.
And it was kind of a sad falling apart of the plan, because I think we talked about it before, where they brought in like WCW talent during the whole invasion thing after WWE took over, and that lasted like 6-7 months, and finally they just
because you could, like, the talent that you wanted either wasn't gonna go or didn't want to go, because they still had their guaranteed
to sit at home on their butts and not do anything.
You know,
there was good money.
There's some guys who couldn't afford that. Like, I could sit on my butt, but then after that, where does my career go? Well,
Oop. You became just a happy guy in the corner there with a little finger. But no, it's a great point, and it's really important to note because you had this kind of the B and C squad of WCW talent that came over during the whole invasion process. You had some really bad folks that just not bad folks, people that were not interesting. WWF was pretty pissed off because the talent there was pissed off because, hey, here are all these folks hopping in, trying to get the same time that we are.
Yeah.
In the end, when WWF kind of wins out, what came to the advantage was all these contracts that WCW had signed started expiring. So you had Hogan and Hall and Nash all kind of came together at the same time in the WWE. And I remember they were in Milwaukee the first time. Again, I know this from the documentary. They were in Milwaukee, and then I remember Hogan's first match was actually back in WWE, was here in Detroit, and I went to the match and watching him, and he came out to the crowd going, we went bonkers. Everyone went absolutely bonkers. It was also Brock Lesnar's first. Brock Lesnar wrestled a dark match leading up to Hogan's return that same day. It was the crowd lost it. And he was kind of coming in as the NWO, sort of a bad guy in a weird way, but people couldn't help but be happy that he was back in the WWE.
Yeah, so. that was like right after the Rumble, I believe, or might have been and leading up to WrestleMania. So Hogan started feuding with The Rock and all that stuff, and I was at WrestleMania 18.
Oh wow! Cool.
In Toronto, and just what you said, like the crowd went absolutely batshit for Hogan. I
was at WrestleMania 19 where Hulk Hogan wrestled McMahon.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, even then, Hogan's pop was still huge. People were still we're talking a whole year after that. It's still people are still hot for Hogan, and
and they would trot out his corpse every year. It seemed like at WrestleMania, and that was basically the last few times that Hogan showed up. But I mean, in a nutshell, that's the Monday Night Wars. But it was so interesting in that time, 95, 96, 97, 98, when things were heating up between these two big wrestling promotions, and we had. WWF was the stodgy old promotion that did things really by the book. And then you had the WCW, which was fresh and new and kind of took things in a different way. And Bischoff was perfect in that position of producing because that was his background, but not so much in the business side. You had WWF, which was decent in the business side, but kind of failing on the entertainment side. And so it was interesting to see these two kind of go at each other, and I mean, I'd hang out with friends on Monday nights just to watch WCW, and then and I wasn't even really a wrestling fan. It became a very social event. I think to me that was one of the coolest aspects of it.
I mean, that's what wrestling became pop culture again.
Yep.
It was you didn't have to like wrestling to sort of want to be involved in it. Like there was always something to talk about. There was always something interesting. There were celebrities all the time, which was a big deal constantly, and just there was a lot to take in with especially WCW back then. So
at the time, my wife Wanda, she had no interest. Well, she used to watch wrestling a bit when she was a kid, but like at the time, she had no interest in wrestling. And so, when we first got together, I was kind of showing her things in wrestling that were more storyline based. And one thing that was neat that WWF was doing at the time was that they were focusing on wrestling, but they were taking more risks in what kinds of stories they were going to tell, whether that be a little more edgy or a lot more edgy actually than what WCW was doing at the time to pop some ratings. But the stories were just better between the Austin McMahon storyline and how each week you just didn't know what was going to be the next thing that they were going to do that was totally off the wall, and that drew us in. And even again, the pop culture thing you said, like people who weren't wrestling fans were drawn in by these stories. I mean, they weren't there to watch a 3 count. They were there to watch what the heck they were going to do every week. And so it was a big part of that tide turning.
It's just a fantastic time for wrestling,
Yeah. And it's a time that can't ever happen again. Like
yeah. I mean, it's not like there's any other promotions right now.
I mean,
let's get into that really quickly here. So news broke. I mean, it didn't really break over the weekend, but it's been a slow churn with TNA Wrestling, which I think was Jeff Jarrett. Is that he started that?
It was like Jeff and Jerry Jarrett. Like, like it was it was like part of the NWA brand when it first.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But when it first started, it was pay-per-view only.
Oh, was it really? Okay.
It was. Yeah. Like a weekly pay-per-view before a reduced price.
Yeah.
And then it was.
I remember looking at it and thinking, like, why would I spend like $100 a month to watch wrestling? Like, it's a bad business practice.
I think one of the interesting things for me, and this is really recent, was when Billy Corgan bought took ownership of the.
It's not his first foray. You know what word I'm saying here?
Foray.
Yeah, right into wrestling either. It was.
Oh really?
Yeah, because he was part of some other wrestling organization, something little independent thing, but nothing major. But
I think he's been a little. Fan. I think he was in some of the later days of ECW.
Oh, okay. You might be right.
For a couple of shots, not much, not like what he's doing now, but.
Well, WWE bought WCW and ECW right around that same time, and then they've been kind of. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's like that's what you're gonna like with the ECW thing, like that's probably. I mean, if WWE winds up with TNA, it's probably gonna be closer to it. ECW situation than a WCW situation.
Yeah. So what they're saying right now is at least some of the stuff that I've been reading today, and actually makes a whole ton of sense, is that so TNA has been around for a little over a decade, somewhere around there. Yeah. Dixie Carter the Carter family owns a big chunk of it, like 70% of it, and then some other investors. And it's been losing talent. Like a lot of the guys just went to WWE. I mean, they became bigger stars.
Yeah. WWE, Ring of Honor.
Yep. Japan, and exactly. And so WWE, they're kind of facing some financial hardship right now, and WWE's coming in and saying, I mean, this literally could happen any day now because the last show is like today and tomorrow, basically. Well, today or tomorrow.
Because they're saying that they don't have the
money.
They don't have the money to put on their pay-per-view on Sunday.
Yeah, yep. And so the WWE can buy it, and from what I've been reading, it's pretty smart, is they're not buying it for the talent because the majority of this talent is gone. They're buying it for the back catalog of AJ Styles and all those guys, right?
Yeah, WWE wants that tape library. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, there's some value. There's a real value there.
You've got a missing decade of certain wrestlers' careers. Like that's where Sting was between the closure of WCW and intro into WWE. Like there's Samoa Joe, who eventually main roster, AJ Styles. So
it's amazing to me that now in this day and age, the actual streaming network of WWE has so much power that they're willing to buy TNA Wrestling strictly to bolster their online streaming and their catalog of information, which is wild.
I mean, they really are in the there's like a whole arm of that business that is really there for archiving wrestling history.
It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Even before the network, they were intentionally going out and buying smaller companies, older companies, specifically just to have the library in their archives.
We just talked last week about those rare matches that they have on that collection. Like those tapes came from somewhere, and they're just out hunting for that stuff.
It's selfish, because there's like I want WWE to buy TNA so I can watch TNA stuff. I missed a lot of TNA stuff, but everything that I watched of TNA was so terrible. But I love terrible wrestling, so I will put on a playlist of WCW 2001 and just watch away. Like it's.
But just being able to.
Them sending out Jeff Hardy absolutely wasted.
Yeah. But just being able to cherry pick that stuff. Sorry.
But I watched that pay-per-view. There's things like that I would like to see. There was some bad TNA stuff that will be.
It's so bad. It's so good.
Yeah. But it Billy Corgan, him buying that company outright seems dangerous.
Yeah.
What do you get out of it? Like a wrestling promotion. But
he should stick to Cat Fancy because that's all he.
Yeah.
That's all he.
They have a bad TV slot.
Yeah.
And the name's been poisoned. Like TNA is a bad name to begin with for a wrestling promotion. But on top of that, of what
total nonstop action.
Yeah. But like what are you buying by buying TNA? Like millions of dollars of debt in the name of a company that is known to not pay wrestlers. Like, with the WWE buying it, they may not even buy it. They may wait to the ECW thing and let that company go under.
Oh, really? So that's what happened?
Because with the ECW, they were just the highest bidder for their assets because they had already gone bankrupt. So that's how they got ECW stuff. They were just the highest bidder for the ECW's assets after the company had basically folded already because WWE took their time slot on television.
Yeah.
Effectively killed that company. But I mean, that would make more sense because does WWE want that debt?
No.
But at the same time, what's more important? Because WWE could easily pay that debt.
They could pay it. I mean, is it worth? Are there enough fans right now of some of these wrestlers that they're willing to pay for that debt just to fill out that back catalog so people could be interested in
because who are the biggest names in TNA right now? The Hardys, whose contracts are almost up.
Yeah.
Ethan Carter, I guess. A guy that they already fired not that long ago. Cody Rhodes making his appearance.
Maybe he might debut.
Yeah, Damian Sandow. All these names that, I don't know.
Well, the question is is Drew McIntyre someone else that they also fired? Now, is he a name guy they want to bring back?
All the big names are names of guys that they didn't want.
Sure, right, exactly, yeah. People that they've let go, or people that maybe failed medical exams. So we'll talk about that right now.
But to some of those guys' credit, some of those guys managed to turn things around for themselves and improve. I mean, EC3 is a prime example. They weren't doing anything with him, and now he's had a pretty good run.
That they were trying to set up before he got released from the WWE was America Guy. It was literally just a guy that was in his promos were him in American flag Zubaz exercising. That was gonna be
that was the whole Lex Luger thing that didn't work in the early 90s.
It didn't work then. So definitely it was going to work in 2006.
So whatever happens could very well happen in the next couple days here. Right?
Oh yeah, I definitely see something within a week, knowing for sure. Billy Corgan admitted on ESPN Radio today that Vince McMahon is one of the people that.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah, he himself said that, and they even asked him how do you compete against Vince McMahon, and his response is you don't.
Yeah, you
so
can't.
That's not a very good that's not a very good sign for him buying TNA.
Well, I was gonna say, do you guys think that there is I'll say this, for all intents and purposes, the WWE will end up with TNA assets somehow, whether it's this week or in a couple of weeks or in a few months when they fully go bankrupt or whatever. They're going to end up with this stuff, and it always seems to work on Vince McMahon's.
If they can't get if they can't get the funding for the pay-per-view this weekend,
that's it. It's done.
That's it, because you end up reneging on contracts that you made.
Yeah.
And there's no coming back from something like that.
Yep. So, exactly.
It's not the first time though. This has been a story that has happened many times. Where they didn't have the money to put on their show this weekend, and they somehow pulled it out. So, but that is not a good business.
No, it's not. So, and they're really, Ring of Honor, and maybe there's a couple other really small promotions out there. There really isn't anything for the WWE. It's been that way for a couple decades now. Really, there's been nothing in the way of the WWE. And this is what I'm trying to decide or discover or figure out what can smaller wrestling outfits or promotions do? This is a different conversation for a different time. What can they do to gain traction against, you know, the behemoth that is WWE and so on, right?
Well, I mean, it's not like these companies aren't like already better than the WWE in terms of what they're doing. Like, you know, Ring of Honor is a better like wrestling show to watch from a wrestling standpoint. But you know, without having money, without having that kind of backing and support from somebody, some miracle is going to have to happen for somebody at some point to get a major TV slot somewhere to be worldwide. I mean, like,
I mean, the WWE, maybe the WWE's biggest competition right now is UFC. I mean, that
I mean,
could very well be.
Yeah, if there was a Monday night UFC show,
yeah,
they could probably, they could see. I mean, I was gonna say they could see a drop in ratings, but it's not like the ratings have already been dropping. So
yeah, it's true.
Yeah, the uphill battle to try to compete with WWE is too monumental. As a smaller Fed, you have to be happy to have a slow build of momentum and notoriety and
WCW was able to do it because WCW had already existed.
It existed, it had been established. Yeah, had huge money backing.
Before it got huge,
and they ended up winning it.
Yeah,
like, yeah. I don't think it's ever going to happen at this point. Like, if it hasn't happened yet, if TNA couldn't pull it off when they tried, and they had a major network backing them at a point, you know, like Spike
really,
like.
I mean,
Spike
I think
was a huge network for a little bit.
They were for a while, yeah. When the VGAs were still on there. No, I think, you know, maybe for any promotion or something to be as to try to take stuff away from WB, you would require a ton of money, a ton of backing, a network, and I'm not even talking about cable. You would need like network level.
Yeah, network.
And then, or I mean, maybe I'd say like ESPN or whatever, but something big. And you need a big defection in talent.
Yeah, you can't because that was one of the things WCW was going to turn everything around at a point because Bischoff was working a deal with NBC. They were going to have a network special like multiple times a year.
All right, that's true. Yeah.
And that was going to turn everything around, and obviously that fell through. Or else, if you had an NBC deal, that might actually help turn. I mean, you can't have an NBC deal because WWE is part of that. Yeah, USA is part of that umbrella.
Sure.
But you know, something like that. If Disney decided to get into the wrestling business, you know, ABC and ESPN are two huge networks to put wrestling on. You know, so
I mean, that could. I mean, not that ESPN won't even touch hockey, let alone you know, wrestling. But there are opportunities.
Well,
but
ESPN it's weird seeing ESPN talk about wrestling again. It's super weird to this day. Like getting alerts from the ESPN app talking about happenings in WWE is something else these days.
But you know, and maybe just, you know, you have stuff like Lucha Underground, which is it's its own completely different thing. And it works well, and it's happy being what it is, and maybe that's the direction you can go in because it's very different than WWE.
Yeah, I think that's the absolute. I mean, TNA. I mean, TNA got people to watch TNA when they were doing that weird Matt Hardy stuff. Like that turns people in because it is absolutely unlike anything that WWE has ever done.
Yeah.
Like even when WWE tried to do it, they couldn't pull it off.
No.
Like they don't have that. That's not that they are a wrestling company, and just deviating too far from wrestling doesn't work out for them. Like every single time, like whether it be a weightlifting league or a football league, you know, like when they deviate away from what they know what they're doing, which is the wrestling side of things, it doesn't work out for them. And so having somebody come in and be a completely different type of wrestling, a thematic wrestling league
could be very cool.
Could act like with huge money behind it and backing of some key players in the industry, maybe you could actually, you know, pull something off. But until then, it's just going to be where we're at now. I mean, it's just
you've got to get it in front of eyes. I mean, Lucha Underground, I think, is a tremendous product, and it's unique and it's unpredictable. and those are key things. But you have to have like being on the El Rey Network. While it's a nice thing for Robert Rodriguez to have his own show, I don't think enough people have that channel or have access to it.
I mean, I don't have that channel.
Right.
Like I have to get like Sling TV or whatever to be able to
right.
find it off of iTunes.
Like you have to have that distribution channel because I mean TNA, like you said, JJ, the Matt Hardy stuff has brought eyes to TNA, but those eyes may not know where to exactly look. I mean the pop channel.
I had to watch it on YouTube because they uploaded it to YouTube.
Right.
Like that was where I have to watch that stuff because I don't think I get that channel. I've never seen it on my TV. I know it used to be the TV Guide channel.
Yeah.
That's as far as my. So, like, I don't think I get that channel.
Well,
maybe I do, but
it'll be super interesting over these next couple days for TNA to find out what happens and and how that potentially affects just more of the landscape of wrestling and some of the things we talked about today. But we're unfortunately going to have to end our short, long episode.
Not a short one.
A pretty short one. This may be the longest one yet. That's quite all right. Always fantastic.
We barely touched on any of it.
We did only barely. I'm sure we could do more. There's so many awesome things that came out of the Monday Night Wars. We'll definitely come back to it. And listeners and viewers, please let us know if you'd like us to talk about more aspects of this, specific aspects of this, because there were so many great things that came out of the Monday Night Wars, and we wouldn't have talked about the Cruiserweight Classic if it wasn't for the Cruiserweight Championship and all that stuff within WCW that really brought that class up. So anyway, save that for another day. You will find us this weekend, more than likely, if not tomorrow or Saturday, Sunday at the latest, up on iTunes, which will be awesome. Yeah, you can finally subscribe, and all our old episodes will be on there. This is our 5th episode, which is pretty cool already. Thank you guys for listening and watching. And you can find us on sidequesting.com, YouTube. Just do the search and we'll put it up there. All that fun stuff. I'm Dali. You can find me at Dali Demosky. John, where can they find you?
At John Keogh on Twitter.
JJ.
At the double J _, after the and double.
There you go. Thank you, everybody.
At some point, but I won't.
Yeah, well, it's in the posts, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways, thank you, everybody. It's been awesome. It's been great. And we'll see you on the next episode of SQW.